It's 5 Live Breakfast. Good morning. Ryanair have announced that they have 9 new routes and around 1,000 new jobs. Andy's here to tell us a bit more.
That's right. The new routes, Rachel, in Liverpool, Manchester and the East Midlands going from there, and 5 from Manchester, 2 from Liverpool, 2 from the East Midlands. And Ryanair claims there will be an extra 1 million passengers, which should sustain 1,000 new jobs. We can ask the Chief Executive, Michael O'Leary. Good morning.
Morning. Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Tell us a bit more about your basis for saying there'll be an extra 1 million passengers as a result of you opening up a few new routes.
Well, we're not only adding 9 new routes at Liverpool, Manchester and East Midlands next year, but we're also adding more flights on existing routes. So in total, we'll add about 1.3 million seats to those 3 airports next year. With our 80% load factor, that's about 1 million additional passengers. And the airports themselves calculate that 1 million passengers will sustain about 1,000 new jobs across the 3 airports.
Well, but you'll be taking those passengers and therefore those jobs off other airlines, won't you? Because you yourself have said that demand for flights is going down.
I've never said demand for flights is going down. We've been growing like gangbusters for 20 years. Demand for Ryanair flights is exploding. I mean, what happens in every market where we enter or where we grow is we increase the size of the market because more and more cheap fares come into those markets. Now, there will be some reductions next year. BMI Baby has gone bust, and there's a few other airlines. EasyJet, for example, has pulled a lot of flights out of Liverpool.
Traffic at Stansted is going down.
That's true. Airports that put prices up generally suffer when traffic declines, but traffic at Ryanair is rising. Last year we carried 76 million passengers. This year it'll be 80 million passengers, and next year I think it'll grow to about 85.
Good for Ryanair, and you're bound to promote
Absolutely.
Ryanair, of course. But with Stansted, if the numbers are going down, you're calling for an extra runway there, and you're also calling for a 3rd runway at Heathrow.
Yeah.
If the numbers are going down, if the squeeze on living standards is making us fly less, why should we need more runways?
In actual fact, people are flying more in the UK, but what's happening at some airports, such as Stansted, where the BAA have a monopoly and have been raising prices for the last 5 years, and traffic has been declining for the last 5 years. We've said this is being artificially constrained. The Competition Commission agree with us, which is why they're now forcing the BAA to sell Stansted to a new owner. We welcome that because I think it'll lead to more competition between Gatwick, Heathrow and Stansted. The real problem in London, and you look at the congestion at Heathrow, is we haven't had a new runway in the southeast for 20 years. And instead of these madcap ideas that the mayor comes up with, like building a new airport in the middle of the Thames marshes where there's no railways, no motorways, the simple solution is add extra runways at Heathrow, at Gatwick and Stansted where the existing road and rail infrastructure already exists.
So what's your view of the coalition government's progress with the runways?
There's been no coalition government progress. The coalition government hasn't a bull's notion when it comes to aviation. They've been so busy pandering to idiots in the environmental lobby that they've forgotten about actually economic growth generally starts with aviation growth, because aviation growth leads tourism growth and tourism growth leads economic growth.
Tell us more about the idiots in the environmental lobby.
Well, where do you want me to start?
Well, this remorseless expansion of your business and other airlines.
Yeah.
There are some people who are genuinely concerned about the environmental impact.
Never met one yet. I don't see anybody who's genuinely concerned about the environmental impact of aviation. If you look at the impact of aviation on tourism across the world, it's generally been one of the great leaders of economic growth, particularly in undeveloped countries. It's one of the areas where you create entry-level jobs for young people very quickly. And yes, you have some kind of withering ninnies worrying on about global warming, which, despite the fact there's been no rise in world temperatures for 15 years, has now had to morph into climate change.
So never mind the scientific consensus about that.
There isn't a scientific consensus. There's a scientific debate. I hate when people assume these great certitudes. There has been no increase in global temperatures for 15 years. There was an increase for 25 years before that, and for 25 years before that there was a decline.
So what would you say to people who'd say you're a climate change denier for saying that?
I'm not a climate change denier. I can only deal with the facts as we see them. There's been no increase in... Why has the global warming debate changed into a climate change debate? Because they can't stand up global warming.
So, Michael O'Leary, when you see, we're discussing wind farms later, when you see a hill speckled with wind farms, what do you think?
I don't think anything at all.
Don't you?
No. I'm too busy flying over that hill, getting out of my £20 airfare, bringing people on holidays, reuniting families, creating economic growth and jobs.
Out of interest, do you print your own boarding pass?
Yes, of course.
Or do you have someone to do it for you?
No, we're a low-cost airline. We don't have lackeys out there that do all these
You don't
things.
have a single lackey?
I don't have... Well, I'm probably the only lackey there is in Ryanair. No, I print my own boarding cards. I pull the boarding cards generally at boarding gates as well.
Do you ever pay a fine because your bags were too heavy? Andy?
No, I'm a very compliant like 99.9% of Ryanair passengers. I comply with the bag levy and I check in online before I arrive at the airport.
I have to go back to that conversation you had, or that exchange, that email exchange, or whatever it was, on Twitter, whatever it was, with one of your passengers who was very upset.
I have never been on Twitter in my life.
Okay, never mind that. But this is what you said. She was very upset about failing to print out her own boarding pass.
Yeah.
And she complained. Your reply to her complaint, she wanted compensation. You said, we have replied politely but firmly, thank you, Mrs. McLeod, but it was your up. And if you screw up, you compensate us and you send us a gesture of goodwill. There are 0.02% of passengers who are equally stupid. We say quite politely to those passengers, off.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good attitude for a business to have to its customers?
I think it's an attitude. We have to facilitate the 99.9% of passengers who comply with our rules, which is print off your boarding card before you arrive at the airport. I don't have any difficulty with a passenger who fails to print off the boarding card, but a passenger who fails to print off the boarding card pays the fine at the airport and then looks for compensation for a fine that was properly paid. I say, thank you, but unfortunately you're not entitled to any compensation. Go blimp off. Yes.
That customer definitely isn't king, is he?
No, of course they're not. Customers who break the rules aren't king. We're there to provide and look after and provide the lowest fare air flights across Europe for the 99.9% of passengers who obey the rules. If you're going through Tesco's at the automated checkout and you slip something into your bag, do you expect Tesco's to look after you? Oh, don't worry about it, you just slipped it into your bag. No, they'll arrest you. They'll take you to court. We don't do that. But we say if you show up at the airport, having agreed to pre-print your boarding card, as Mrs. McLeod did, by the way, on her outbound flight on her 14-day holiday to Alicante, and then came up with some cock and bull story that she was out of the way. And
she says she genuinely couldn't get to a printer.
Well, I genuinely don't believe she couldn't get to a printer, since she was at the printer when she printed off the boarding cards for the outbound flight.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have any difficulty with a passenger who fails to comply with the rules, but it really is a bit bloody English to be writing in afterwards, say, when you paid the fine, say, English, can I please have a refund of a... Well,
Racist alert!
Sorry,
Racist alert!
I was going to say Irish, but no, I'd be in real trouble if I slagged off the paddies. Please don't look for a refund of a fine that you properly paid.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's talk about him as if he's not here. It seems to be working for him, though, this attitude, doesn't it, Andy?
Well,
In terms of his business.
Customer service and price, and whichever counts more clearly. Price.
He's busy, isn't he? And isn't he doing well?
I think Ryanair is still expanding. Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
But
we're finished with
there's a misunderstanding as to what customer service is. Customer service in the airline business is the lowest fare possible and an on-time flight. It's not, we're going to look after you because you made a mess of things.
But don't you feel that some people will say, with the baggage fines, with the extra amount you pay, you're sometimes pushing your customers around?
I disagree.
There's not going to be a meeting of minds here,
The problem is you never hear from the 99% of people who didn't pay the baggage fine.
We do.
You don't.
There are people who love you.
That's only my mother.
Thank you very much. Let's get a quick word.
Thanks, folks.